Place to Marco Calderoni from Politecnico di Milano to present the obligation or the solar obligations.
Thank you for your introduction. I will take the chance of this small break just to give you a general introduction on my presentation. So, in the framework of the project of Med Desire, where, among others, we are trying, or actually we will do it, introduce so-called solar ordinances into the 3 Mediterranean partner countries. So this leads me, first of all, to define what is a solar ordinance, because this might sound strange to some of you. It's a strange name, but it's something many of us already have to face with. Solar ordinances are basically legal instruments, legal provisions, which public authorities, could be at local or at national level, implement in order to basically oblige new buildings, often, sometimes it's existing buildings, to use a certain renewable technology. Could also be related to energy efficiency measures. Anyway, it's a kind of must that the state or the municipality or the region decides to put on new buildings or renovated buildings. And just to give you an example, as you can see on the bottom of the page of the slide, the first local or national, actually, solar ordinance was introduced in Israel in 1980. So in the framework of Med Desire project, we are mainly speaking of solar thermal ordinances, which means new buildings or renovated buildings do have to install a certain amount of solar collector surface. And before I go into the detail, I would like to just state very briefly that solar ordinance has some technical, difficulties. You have to decide how many square meters of collectors, for example, are needed, are required, but it's mainly a political issue. So it's the policymakers who sooner or later decide that they want to put this as a mandatory technology. Okay, a brief overview of what is foreseen within the project. First of all, we have carried out a review, so an analysis of existing ordinances around the world, and you will see there are many, really many. Also in Italy we have one, for example. After this is a kind of benchmark, so we learn what are the main issues to face, which are the critical issues, how to, let's say, learn from mistakes and do it better. And for each of the 3 countries participating in the project, namely Lebanon, Tunisia, and Egypt, we are on the process of selecting one let's say, local public administration. It's a bit different in Egypt, which will introduce a kind of pilot solar ordinance. So the main outcome now of my presentation is the review of what is ongoing all over the world. And this is a map showing almost, I hope, all ordinances which exist around the world in terms of either renewable energy in general or solar energy in particular. Because one of the main results is that many countries decided to go for a solar thermal only ordinance. That means any new building does have to install a solar water heater, for example. But many countries decided to go for a multi-source or multi-technology ordinances, which means you as a building renovator or building constructor are free to decide whether to go for solar thermal, for heat pumps, or for PV could be, for example, and so on. So as you can see, I will not go into the detail of the colors, and so it's not that important, but this is just to show that many countries, or often it's municipalities, the round circles refer to municipalities, they have this already in place. So we analyzed in detail 14 examples of solar obligations or solar ordinances. Here, this is the list. You can see that apart from Barcelona in Spain, who started as a really newcomer in the early 2000s or late 90s, all the other ordinances are more or less recent. So they have been introduced after 2006, 2007, I would say. And you can see there are, we tried to pick up some all around the world. So we have some Chinese regions, we have South America, we have Northern Africa, we have Europe, and so on. And now some results. I tried to highlight those which I hope are most interesting to you. And first of all, the building types. So which are the buildings addressed by these obligations? In some cases, you see 6 cases out of 14, all the buildings. So in other cases, it's different categories, just some categories. First of all, residential is obviously the most beloved, let's say. So in almost all ordinances, the obligement is on residential. But in some cases, it's also on health structures, so hospitals, nurseries, and so on. Sometimes it's on sports structures as well. In a few cases, it's on public buildings. There are some ordinances which are only on public buildings. So it's a kind of self-obligation by the government who decides that, okay, in my country or in my municipality, all new public buildings or all renovated public buildings will have a solar water heater. Hotels can be a target, commercial buildings, and schools. Schools, it's a bit more complicated, but it's a technical issue. Concerning the building situation, ordinances mainly address new buildings, but very often, as you can see in the second column, they also address renovated buildings. And concerning the minimum requirement, this is, let's say, the more technical part of the law, which has to be drafted. Most ordinances use as a minimum requisite a certain percentage of the domestic hot water need to be covered via renewables or in particular via solar thermal. So one has to calculate according to standards, the average hot water consumption of a building and size a solar thermal water heater in a way that it will cover a certain percentage of this consumption. And this percentage depends on the country. In some countries, it's just one figure, for example, 50%. In some countries, like in Spain, the percentage to be covered depends on the climate. So if it's hotter and more sun, you have to cover a higher percentage. If it's colder with less sun, you have to cover a smaller percentage. Sometimes it's a square meter per person. So you have to calculate how many people are living or will be living in the apartments, in the buildings, and multiply this figure by a certain square meter amount. Sometimes it's a liter of hot water produced per day per person, and sometimes it's wrong here. It's square meter of collectors per living area, so per size of building. So these are different approaches, as you can see. One very important issue when introducing solar ordinances is quality requirements. Because technologies, especially if it is new technologies, although solar thermal is very well established, but still it's something which installers, for example, do not always comply with. Only 3 minutes, okay? Quality requirements are very important, so you can see in some cases product certification has been introduced, in other cases installer certification, and so on. And then another very important issue is checks. So you oblige people to install solar thermal, but then you also have to check that they are actually complying with the ordinance. So you can check the design documents. So before the building is being constructed, you can check during building construction, you can check after. And then the real monitoring of the impact. So I'm not speaking of monitoring of the single plant, solar plant, but monitoring of how many square meter of collector, for example, have been realized thanks to the ordinance. This is a very difficult point. Almost no country or city actually is really monitoring, so you can see just a few results. Barcelona is the most interesting one because it started 15 years ago, and you can see in 2010, it's the figure for this year, 3,000 buildings have been provided with solar thermal for all in all almost 90,000 square meters of solar collector area installed, which is quite interesting, I think. And now I don't have the time to go into the detail, but support measures are extremely important, and they will be very important also in the partner countries of MedDesire. So you have to inform people, you have to train installers, you have to certify installers, you have to inform policymakers and let them inform the people. You have to maybe build some pilot plant in order to show that, first of all, the administration who is issuing the ordinance is believing in the technology, and so all the others as well should. And the main barriers, or I will maybe put it into the positive way, some success factors are, of course, political commitment, as I mentioned at the beginning, awareness raising campaigns in order to inform people and also train technicians. The law must be simple, as simple as possible. Do not complicate it too much. The calculation method should be very easy in order not to complicate life to technicians and so on. So just 3 last slides to give an overview on what is going on now in the 3 countries. In Egypt, we are on the process of selecting NUCA. NUCA is an Egyptian entity responsible for building new urban areas. So they are building actually quite a lot of buildings. And through the central administration of NUCA, we are going to find 1 or more local NUCAs, because Egypt has many all around the country, who will put a volunteer obligation. The new buildings they are going to create, to build, they will be provided, should be provided with solar. Regarding Tunisia, we have defined that most probably the municipality of Hammam Sousse will be the pilot tester of solar ordinance, and we're going to have a first stakeholder consultation at the end of April in order to inform, building constructors and planners and the technicians of the municipality themselves, because they have to know how it works in order to check that it's actually being applied. This will take place at the end of the month. And in Lebanon, we have almost, I think, defined the Union of Municipalities of Tyre, which comprehends a lot of municipalities, and this will also be a kind of volunteer ordinance, because we will put all the stakeholders around the table and convince them that new buildings should actually be provided with solar. And I think LCC, which is our Lebanese partner, is going to have first consultations with municipalities very soon, next weeks. And that's it from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marco.